get to the big news of the week. We're going to be talking about this on back-to-back shows, I almost guarantee you. With Patrick Mahomes' contract, Ian Rappaport reports that his contract is 10 years, worth $103 million, and includes $177 million in guaranteed mechanisms. What weird phrasing.
Yeah.
In general, this contract is very complicated. We're not going to try to go through all the details because I even tried, and it was hard to go through all of them. There are a lot of pieces to this that are very confusing. But let's first start with your instant reaction to the contract.
Yeah. So initially, I know I'd shot back at you and sent you when I first saw this. I was pretty surprised. It's not often that we get a 10-year contract, especially in the NFL, if ever. So that
We've
worried
gone
me a
like
little
4 or
bit.
5.
Yeah, that worried me a little bit. And then I saw how much money, and that really worried me. I mean, when we're talking about $500 million, it's not a small amount of money. Now, let's be fair. It's one thing that you had mentioned to me. I think he's definitely trending in the direction of being the best player in the NFL, if he isn't already. Now, that's the one thing I don't want to take away from him because the talent is there. But there's too much money here on the table for me over a long period of time. Now, it's something that you and me had talked about and said there is a way for the team to get out of this deal in a couple of years if they want to, but they take a pretty large cap hit still.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, to me, when I look at this contract, is if they can win another Super Bowl in the next couple of years, it seems pretty much worth it because his cap hit won't be as bad as later on down the road.
Yeah.
Where I think they're going to really run into some issues as far as getting talent around him. And that's actually one piece I do want to touch on that I found kind of weird was Mahomes himself said, I don't want to take all the money because I still want to play with good players. Which I understand he didn't take every single penny, but he took a quite bit of change. It wasn't any small amount that he was messing with here.
This is from Sporadic.com. This is our primary website when we're looking at contracts. Here are some pieces I want to highlight. The dead cap for the first year is $64 million, 65, which is obviously not that important because they're not going to cut him. But long term, let's go year 2027, 31 years of age, about $60 million cap hit, which is the largest. A cap hit here trends about $42 million on average, I would reckon. And then some of these roster bonuses are insane. 2025 roster bonus plus workout bonus fully guaranteed on the third league year of 2023 includes a $121.3 million of total dead cap. Those are just examples in terms of some of these incentives. Of course, this is a very brief overview of the contract. There's a lot more pieces of jargon that we just don't understand, and we're not agents. We don't have business degrees. We don't know, this is insane. But here's my concern. I'm fine with this contract. I have no problem. I don't. I really have zero issues. Now, if for example, Deshaun Watson gets over this amount, then I'm going to have a problem.
Yeah.
I think that this is a benchmark contract. If this is not, what I mean by that is if anyone eclipses this contract, we're going to have issues, massive issues. If no one eclipses this, I'm fine. But I don't want it to be like 25 years down the road and a quarterback is making as much as Jeff Bezos, because that's literally what I feel like is happening in the NFL nowadays.
Yeah, just to kind of poke fun at the Texans there. I'm sure Bill O'Brien is already writing up a nice decent $600 million for Deshaun, but yeah, that's kind of that's a point I'll agree with you. If anyone does pass this, I think it's pretty asinine. You know what I mean? It's getting to the point where it's getting a little bit ridiculous. But I'm kind of interested, and I want to get your thoughts on it. But what do you think this means for Dak? Because I know initially Dak in his camp had wanted to get the contract done before Patrick Mahomes. Just because they could kind of set the numbers up differently, where this kind of limits him and how much obviously he's not going to get Patrick Mahomes numbers, but like you're saying, comparing different contracts moving forward, how does this impact Dak?
Well, I also, by the way, I also do want to mention that I was right. I said 2 weeks ago that Patrick Mahomes' deal was going to get done by the end of summer. I almost guaranteed it, and I was right. So I do want to bring that up, that I got that piece correct. I knew it was going to get done by the end of summer. I thought it was going to get done by August. It got done much earlier. But again, I digress. I just wanted to mention that I did get that correct. Moving forward, this doesn't hurt Dak at all. This means he gets more money. Who this hurts is the Cowboys, because the Cowboys cannot afford to pay him. I think the number is moved up now. I think the number is not 30, 35. I think it's 40. And I think his camp looks at this contract and goes, yeah, we're worth not close to that, but we're at least worth 40 mil a year. That's what I think. That's what I think his camp is at now. I think the Cowboys were urging to get the deal done before Mahomes' deal, because they thought no matter what Mahomes signs, that means that money is going to just grow.
Yeah.
And that's what I think happened
fair.
here.
I'm a little worried if Dak is getting even in the ballpark of some of these numbers. Just prep, or I guess personal opinion for me. But going back to Patrick Mahomes, do you feel, because I know you think this contract is worth it, but don't you think a 10-year deal in the NFL is a little bit scary? Like it's a little bit, especially for a guy who's just coming off of a pretty major knee injury. Not obviously like career
It
threat,
wasn't that
but
bad.
if it happens again, I'm a little bit worried.
Keep in mind, this contract, I think, has, what is it, 140 mil injury protection. So it's he gets 140 some mil for injury protection. I don't think it says it on here, but I know it's around 120, 140. Um, the reality is, these guys don't last to 10 years, and I think that the league changes so dramatically over a decade. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, how much different is it when, let's say, a guy like Russell Wilson comes in the league in 2012 to now? The league has changed tremendously. So I think a huge piece of this that we're forgetting is that the league does change dramatically in a decade. And these type of contracts, these guys don't stay on the same team forever. At some point, he's going to get cut or get traded. Probably more than likely get cut. I don't know when that will happen. I think more than likely it comes at the tail end of the contract, but no, this contract will not last 10 seasons. There's nothing historically that shows that it will.
Yeah. Also, another thing I wanted to bring up, an interesting point that I saw. I don't think this necessarily uh, is directed at Patrick Mahomes, because I think he's a little bit different of a player. But what percentage of NFL players do you really think that you could give like a 10-year contract and have them still work their butts off? You know what I mean? Like I said, I don't think that's necessarily directed at Patrick Mahomes, because I do think he has a strong work ethic. I think he's going to stay in the gym, work on his craft. But I wonder how many guys in the NFL that you could really give a 10-year contract and be like, feel really good about it. You know what I mean?
How
I think
comfortable
it's
do you
probably
feel?
like I think it's probably like 5% of NFL players that you could really give a 10-year and have them still come in the locker, be leaders, you know what I mean? At the field every day, working in the locker room, or in the locker room, be good guys, at the, in the weight room, pushing guys, stuff like that. You know what I mean?
I I think maybe 5% is a good number. I'm not sure. I don't even know how many guys in the league really deserve 10-year deals. Um, it's hard to give a 10-year deal to anybody but a quarterback. It's just kind of the nature of the league. But you're only going to give a 10-year contract if you're confident the guy's willing to compete year in, year out. If you're not, I don't think a team is foolish enough. I mean, again, some organizations are foolish, but I don't think any organization is foolish enough to give a 10-year contract to someone they don't think is going to be competitive when a guy like Patrick Mahomes gets to 34 or 35,
I
right?
think you're right. I think outside of a quarterback, it would be a little bit rough. It's just a point I wanted to bring up, because we really do criticize like these long type of contracts in baseball, So I wonder if that criticism is going to start to creep in towards, like you said, towards the later half of this kind of contract. You know what I mean? Where
Mm-hmm.
we usually see a tail off in a lot of these bigger contracts throughout sports, baseball, now football.
I think baseball. This is one of the most interesting pieces about this contract is you look at it and what's your first thought? Baseball. This is a baseball contract. I
Yeah.
mean, it is, but at the same time, it also brings up another question that I've thought about, and obviously, I've talked to Brandon about this, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. But he said this is a stupid question, but I do want to bring this up to you. Eventually, is there going to be validity to a discussion that we are going to eliminate quarterbacks from the cap? If money keeps going up like this, do you think that's likely?
Um, I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a stupid question because I think that there is some validity to that. I could see it. I don't know how, like you said, obviously I don't know how those type of things would be structured and all that. But if numbers keep inflating like this, like jumps like this, yeah, it's definitely
Mm-hmm.
something in the conversation. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Obviously, like I said, it would be hard to kind of, structure the rest of the team and stuff around that, but
Mm-hmm.
it's something to take into account.
It's a tough question for me because I've heard this discussion happen for years. Like, all right, what if we take quarterbacks out of cap consideration? But once I saw this contract, I saw, okay, let's say over the next 10 years it keeps jumping, right? Because let's say Deshaun Watson gets I don't know, a $500 million plus deal, whatever, and then someone else comes along, another rookie, I don't know, let's say Joe Burrow comes along, he finishes his 5 years and he plays, very well, and it just keeps jumping is basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
That's where I think the worrisome comes, and this is where I don't know if the league is going to step in or owners are going to feel a certain way about it, but at some point, yes, quarterbacks are worth it, but to what degree? Because as I talked about, this is the benchmark. If someone goes over this, I think we're going to have a massive issue on our hands long term. Maybe not in the immediate future, but 5-10 years down the road, it could be a problem.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Going back to your point, I think it would kind of your point about eliminating cap from the quarterback situation. I think it would almost kind of sour the league. I think you'd have a lot. I think you'd be trending in the direction of having a lot more if that sort of thing were to open up. I think it would just kind of open the floodgates, and I think you'd see a lot of 10-year contracts. But obviously, these teams and these owners want to lock up their quarterbacks long term. But like I said, other than like Tom Brady, a lot of these guys don't have this like sort of longevity. So it's going to really kind of sour, that for me, it would sour that position and kind of ruin how we view it as a whole rather than, where you can move off a guy in a couple years if it's not working. If you're handing out 10-year deals, I really think it would really, mess with the whole situation. I think that's probably where you get the most fight back against it. But I don't know. I just think handing out, like, obviously, like you said, this is a benchmark and you know, it's for a really good player. I'm not discounting that, but you're opening up that possibility for a guy like Dak to get near this kind of money. And I'm not saying that, you know, obviously he wouldn't be passing it. Hopefully, I mean, hopefully, but even Dak, a guy like Dak in this sort of realm of numbers to me is just, it's not healthy. You know what I mean? I think you're going to see a depreciation in overall rosters, especially like you said, if we don't take away the cap hit for the quarterbacks. I think you're going to see a depreciation in rosters because if these guys start taking up this amount of cap and this amount of space, I think it's going to be hard for teams to put together. And you're going to see even more of the trend of where you try and get a good, quarterback on a rookie deal and then fill in
Mhm.
the roster around him.
And that's why we always talk about with you got to win a Super Bowl when a guy's young. When a guy's ready and a guy's young, you got to get it. You got to find a way to win a Super Bowl, and luckily the Chiefs did that last year. But I mean, I think it's a complicated discussion about the future of the quarterback position, one of the most unique things about the NFL now, more than decades past, is that the quarterback position, every team has someone there, right? Every team has a guy that you can kind of pin to. Like the Patriots finally have their guy, let's say in Cam Newton. If he does end up starting, you have even Gardner Minshew starting for the Jags. Yes, he's probably a fringe starter at this point, but at least there are guys even at the bottom end of the league that are clearly starters for these teams. And there's not really a random quarterback competition like in Chicago, for example. There's not many of those in this league, and it's nice, and it's made the league better and more interesting, but at what cost for the rest of these teams? And then if quarterbacks take up so much of the cap, that does mean that good players, or let's say good D linemen, get less money, and some might just be like, you know what, I'm going to be just stuck in free agency. It could dilute the whole league in some way too.
Yeah, and that's something that you and me had talked about. I'm a little bit worried about, Chris Jones getting a deal moving forward. But like you said, there's something to be said also for a guy like Tom Brady probably leaving, over the whole course of his career, probably $100 million on the table. You know what I mean? Taking less so that he can play with better players. I really am worried about this roster moving forward. Obviously Chris Jones is the big one. Tyreek Hill later on. I feel like you're going to start to dilute, like we've been talking about, some of these rosters where, yeah, it's good to have a quarterback in place and, kind of that franchise face, but you also have to be able to put around him a solid roster, which is where something you and me, like I'm really not sure they're going to be able to get Chris Jones signed to a long-term deal. Now that's just one small piece, but like I said, moving forward, Travis Kelce's next contract later on, Tyreek Hill, are these guys going to want to take pay cuts to play with these quarterbacks? Or, there has to be a line somewhere.
Yeah.
Like I said, for Tom Brady, especially, always taking less money to make sure he plays with a better player. There is definitely, I think there's a formula there to be followed rather than taking a whole lot of money. You know what I mean?
There's also been an interesting shift with how teams not only are drafting and trading, but also how they're looking at contracts. Jared Goff this offseason restructured his deal. Olivier Vernon restructured his deal earlier this week. There is a lot of deal restructuring happening as well. I think Lane Johnson, most of his deal is just bonuses, and the cap it's like $500K. And that's one of the interesting parts about this too, is some of these guys, some of these quarterbacks, maybe like, give me this money, but give it to me in bonuses, where the cap hit won't be as bad. So maybe we'll come along and there'll be quarterbacks like that. But with Chris Jones, I still feel like they're going to get that deal done. I think that the organization is too good for them to sort of, I don't know. I think the organization now with Andy Reid is at a point where they're like, we need this guy. And yes, it's been a rough patch, but we wanted to take care of the Mahomes deal. He's the most important player on our roster. We took care of it. Now let's kind of figure out Chris Jones. And yes, I think it will be a process, but I imagine that they'll find a way to get it done, because how these deals work. I mean, look at the Zeke deal last year. Did that look like it was going to get done at all to you last year? No. And it ended up getting done by the end of the summer. So every year we go through these players that, now of course there's some outliers and guys like Le'Veon Bell who sat out the whole year. And of course the running back position is different. So we'll see what happens with Dalvin Cook. But for most of these guys, there's these holdouts, and it's a frustrating part of the league. I think we can both agree that the most frustrating part of the league are these holdouts, and it just worries you from so many perspectives. A fantasy perspective, especially, I think you and I can both agree. But just from a fan perspective, to want to watch these talents, I think it's difficult, but it's kind of become part of the business. But at some point by the end of the summer, these guys find a way, more than likely, to get contracts done.
Yeah, the only thing I think you and me are gonna probably just differ on that Chris Jones situation. I think what sets that apart to me from like a situation like you said, Zeke last year or something, is we've seen these organizations kind of set a tone from the beginning of who they want to pay. I think Kansas City did a good job of like really showing that they wanted to pay Patrick Mahomes from the beginning. To me, it hasn't looked like they wanted to really get a deal done like long term with Chris Jones. Same thing in Dallas. I mean, yeah, we could make the argument that, it seemed like that Zeke deal wasn't going to get done, but by all accounts, I feel like they've been pushing off the Dak Prescott contract. You know what I
Well,
mean?
it also shows how not comfortable they've been, but I also think part of it, in terms of, I believe how Jerry Jones might be feeling about the whole Dak thing is, this team is still competitive, I think, or at least somewhat competitive. Yes, it hasn't been tremendously competitive, but at least it still is to some degree. I think part of the franchise tag thing with Dak is that we have Mike McCarthy there, and they want to see how it works before they give him a long-term contract. Now, is that perfect? Because at some point, are you just going to be like Kirk Cousins, where the Redskins just keep giving him
Yeah.
franchise tag after franchise tag, and it keeps going up? Because that's also going to be another problem for them as a team. But that also might be why they decided to put the franchise tag on him, internally speaking. But I don't think those contract talks have gotten worse than I think the Chris Jones deal is going to get.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair. I just feel like these organizations usually, kind of put forward who they're going to pay first. Like I said with the Cowboys thing, they're paying offensive linemen, they're paying, Amari Cooper, they're paying everyone around
They haven't
Dak.
paid Amari Cooper. They got rid of Byron Jones, so they haven't been perfect on it.
Yeah, but I just feel like usually the first kind of inclination that you get from these organizations is who you're gonna, who they seem like they want to pay.
Yeah. It's a really interesting conversation. Of course, it's a very money sort of type of conversation, but I think it is important for the long-term longevity of the league, but also just in general how we look at the game as fans and as analysts. This has become a much bigger part of the league as money has continued to grow. And also, let's keep in mind that one final thing, that the cap is going to drop next
Yeah.
year. So I wonder how that's not only going to affect this contract, but every new quarterback contract that comes. Because the cap is inevitably going to drop depending on how this season ends up.
Yep. That's what I'm worried about, because that can really, make these numbers a lot worse.
Yeah.